Before we get started, I want to tell you about my experience with Own It Fitness. Own It Fitness is a place that helped me discover my fitness goals. They did a full evaluation of my physical condition, and they set out a plan for me to be able to meet my goals. And on top of that, they found a way to be able to work with my busy schedule. And they can do that for you as well. Own It Fitness is the perfect place for professionals to find the friends that they need to help them meet their physical goals. If you're looking for a place that can help you, if you're looking for a place that's friendly and a place that will help you confidently meet the physical goals that you have for yourself, then check out Own It Fitness. They're on the corner of Mallory and Blakeow. This episode has been brought to you by Fremont Bank. Fremont Bank has been serving people and businesses in our community for over 60 years. For more information about the Fremont Bank, check out episode 104 on the Fremont Podcast. This episode has also been brought to you by Minutemen Press. If you are looking for design or printing needs, reach out to them. Let them know you heard about them on the Fremont Podcast. They'll give you 20% off on your first order. Banter Bookshop is your local go-to for all your reading resources. If they don't have it on the shelf, you can ask them and they can order it for you. Check them out on Capitol Avenue. Let them know that you heard about them on the Fremont Podcast. If you are looking to buy or sell a home, check out Petrocelli Homes on Niles Boulevard.
An open invitation to all Fremont student journalists. An open invitation to the parents of all Fremont student journalists. If you worked for your school newspaper and would like to make an audio story for our podcast, we will air it. We will help you, we will edit, we will give advice. We don't even have to meet in person. We would love to have student journalists, teenagers with a point of view and a life lived in Fremont that we don't have access to. We would love for you to tell your stories, or tell the stories of those around you, or at least tell stories from your perspective. This is a call out to the students as individual people. We're not going to be able to go through your schools because, it's summer. If you had more fun in journalism class than you expected, and it scratched an itch that you didn't know you had, let's do more work. Reach out to us through our website, thefremontpodcast.com, or message us on Instagram. Your parents are definitely going to have to be involved. We will need their consent, but we have worked with teens before. We'd like to do it again. To repeat myself, an open invitation to the student journalists of this town. If you can come up with a story idea and do the field reporting, we can help edit, and you will get airtime.
I'll tell you a really funny story.
Love it.
So, you have to take driving lessons before you turn 16,
right.
And you're in the, student driver beware. A friend of mine and I were in the same car, and we had a driving instructor who didn't know what Sikhs were. So we took him to the Gurdwara for free food.
Oh my!
During our driving lesson to teach him a little bit more about Sikhism.
That's
and
awesome.
We were just laughing because we could if you needed to eat, you could just go there.
Wow!
And I think we changed his perception.
Coming to you straight from Fremont, California, this is the Fremont Podcast, dedicated to telling the stories of the past and present of the people and places of the city of Fremont, one conversation at a time.
You are listening to episode 119 of the Fremont Podcast.
So basically, how many more episodes do we have this season?
The season's 4.
One
So
more.
this Friday, you said it's going to be Haulers.
Yeah.
So then that takes care of May 24th, and then you got May 31st, June 7th, and June 14th.
Okay.
Now, here's your host, Ricky B.
So I am so excited to have Jasmine. Is it Basrai?
Basrai.
Okay. Excited to have Jasmine on the Fremont Podcast. And I have to say why I'm so excited. She has been a huge supporter and encourager in probably every way possible. She has been a vocal fan of the podcast as she worked with the Fremont Chamber of Commerce, I felt like every time I showed up, she was putting in a plug for the podcast. And then she was also, as the owner of Holler's Pharmacy, she was a sponsor, a partner sponsor, and then she's given us other guests to have on the podcast. So I can't think of another way that we could be supported that she hasn't already done. So, and we've been having this conversation, I think, for a good long while, to have her on the podcast, and now it's actually happened. So Jasmine, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to hear a little bit about your story. I know that in the past you've told me that your family was one of the first of a particular group of people that came to Fremont. So tell me a little bit about your family coming to Fremont, and what was the dynamic of all of that? Share some of that with me.
Yeah, when I grew up in Fremont, it was a small little sleepy town, still had gladiola fields and farms and things like that. It was growing up into what it's now. But there was a very small Sikh community that was rising up. So my dad is a pharmacist and owned pharmacies here in Fremont. And a group of him and doctors around the area realized the need that Sikhs needed a place to worship. And actually started the first Sikh Gurdwara, which down the street here on Mission. Started actually in Newark as a small place. They would rent it out and start a fundraising committee to actually buy their own piece of property. So where you see Gurdwara Road now is the legacy of maybe like 7 or 8 families that would meet at my dad's pharmacy on the weekends and say how we're going to do this, how we're going to get involved in the community. And because of that, they also used to do a lot of health fairs. There were doctors, pharmacists, nurses, a lot of medical professionals from the Sikh community that said, we want to raise our families here, so we need a place to worship. And Fremont's a very inviting place. And I remember going to school, being some of the few Sikh families here, but just being welcoming and being part of the community right away.
That's awesome. And so when did they start that? When did they open that? You said it started in Newark, but when was that started in Newark, and then when did it move to Niles?
It's going to be sometime in the 80s. So my dad came to Fremont in 1979. So I want to say, somewhere in the mid 80s, especially when there was like a lot of strife in India with the Sikhs. And there was a lot of Sikh migration from India in 1984. That's when there was a big influx of Sikhs into California, because Sikhs are mostly a farming community. And so in Yuba City and other places, you'll see them. But in the Bay Area, it was a very big professional community of doctors, engineers, pharmacists like my family. And so it's somewhere in the mid 80s as my family is growing up. And if you go to the Sikh temple now, you'll see 2 buildings. The building where they call the Langar Hall, where they serve the food, that was the actual original building. And then the new hall is what they built up and bought more of the property around there as well.
I have to admit, I'm a little unfamiliar with what makes the Sikh community, what distinguishes them from, say, other worship centers or from other worshiping communities. Like I see Sikh people involved in a lot of things around Fremont. Like I think that the one thing that stands out to me the most is like a 4th of July parade. They're always handing out water and to the people that are there, and I just think that's awesome. So what maybe you can help me a little bit. What is it about the Sikh community? What drives them? What's the mission? What's the thought behind what they're doing to help be invested in the community?
And I think my answer is going to be a lot about what drives me. So it's really a fundamental urge to give back. It's just part of your DNA. So, it is a lot about the word seva. And I'm not a Sikh person, I'm second generation Sikh is what I like to say. There's a lot more people who are much more well versed in it, but I do speak, read, and write Punjabi, and in Gurmukhi I can read a little bit, which is the Sikh, which is the language. But growing up in Fremont, what was so great about how the Sikh community was accepted, and just it was there, and it was always about giving back.
Okay,
I'll tell you a really funny story.
Love it.
So when you have to take driving lessons before you turn 16,
right.
and you're in the student driver beware. A friend of mine and I were in the same car, and we had a driving instructor who didn't know what Sikhs were. So we took him to the Gurdwara for free food.
Oh my!
During our driving lesson to teach him a little bit more about Sikhism.
That's
and
awesome.
We were just laughing because we could just, if you needed to eat, you could just go there.
Wow!
And I think we changed his perception because
That's
I was
great.
always, with later in the 90s and after 9/11, Sikhs became, with the turbans, and we became different. But growing up, it was always about giving back. Community service was at the core.
Yeah.
And that's why you see the Sikh community do the water. And if you ever need a meal, the kitchen's always open. Wow. And if you need a place to sleep, it is always open. Wow. And that's the part of community that brings back. And it's really great because the Sikh Gurdwara here in Fremont is a prolific one in the United States in terms of its impact in its community and people migrating from different places to be in Fremont because of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's interesting that you mentioned what you did about 9/11 and just the perception of different peoples. I think it is important, and I'm going to speak from my perspective, which I didn't grow up here in Fremont. I grew up in a community that was more of like a monocultural or bicultural community. And I feel like there's a lot more cultures coming together in one place here in Fremont. But I do think that that's something, as someone who came in from the outside and is trying to understand the people that live here in Fremont, I think that there are certain things, and maybe it's because of movies and television that have given a certain stereotype, a certain stereotype that makes you question, like, who is this person, and what are they all about, And I think that one of the things that's been a good thing, and I think a beautiful thing for me to learn since I've been in Fremont, and I remember someone telling me very plainly, if they have a turban on, they're the best. You can trust them. You can. They're the good guys, And I feel like that's something that I'm really grateful for, because I do think that as I've been around here long enough to observe different people, especially like the parades and other events like that, I'm just like, man, they're doing really good things for other people, and I really love that. Yeah,
Growing up, my grandfather wore a turban. And he was prolific on AC Transit to take from his house to the Gurdwara, and people would pick him up. He never experienced, in the years, he lived to be 90-something, and in the years, he never felt like this wasn't his second home.
That's great.
He didn't really talk about feeling uncomfortable growing up in Fremont, walking around with my grandmother who wore full Indian clothing, and my grandfather taking care of us. It didn't feel out of place. It didn't really feel like this was weird.
Yeah, that's great.
It just kind of, everybody's like, okay, she's got a turban and, she's here. There was never a fear of, we have to leave.
Yeah.
This is not safe for us. Yeah. Actually, like, that the Muslim community felt the same way. There was a rally around all cultures that one should not be singled out because of what happened.
That's great.
And in fact, what I think happened too is those communities, especially the Sikh community, said we need to be more visible. And so for me to identify as Sikh, it's okay. Like it wasn't one of those things I needed to hide. And while I'm not fully practicing, it did form a lot of my experiences in my life because I was raised by the family that I was raised by, but it never felt like Fremont wasn't a safe place.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that.
That's great.
And I love that for my son.
Yeah,
I do.
That's right. That's great. We'll be right back. You can hear the rest of this conversation in just a moment. We were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but I wanted to have you give me a little bit of a plug for Fremont Bank. Fremont Bank is a current sponsor of the podcast, and so you made a few remarks about why you bank with them with your business, and so tell me a little bit about your experience with Fremont Bank as a quasi ad for them right now.
So I'm not quite a millennial. I'm a little bit older than that,
Yeah.
but if in 100 years ago you had told me that I'd go to the bank like once a week in person, depositing stuff and deposit slips and all this kind of stuff, I would have laughed. Everything could be electronic.
Yeah, that's right.
You would say
That's
everything's electronic. We should automate this. No
That's right.
paper. But the reality of owning your own business is you deal with cash, checks, everything. And
Yeah.
you need change for your registers. You need to go to a bank.
That's right. Yeah.
And so my experience with Fremont Bank was, at least you go to a bank that knows you.
Yeah.
And, I would say, oh no, I'm going to try something new. All failures. At the end of the day, those personal relationships, whether it's as a business relationship or a personal relationship, they matter. You need to be able to pick up the phone, even if you want to do it over email. I mean, you can't do everything over an app.
Sure. Yeah.
And for me, when I walk into Fremont Bank and everybody knows my name, it's not like Cheers. There's no beer being served, but
well, there maybe is now.
there might be upstairs. But I will say, I opened my new accounts there because I can't imagine doing business anywhere else where I need support. That's great. And Fremont Bank supports you.
That's great. Well, thanks for the plug in on that. And I've had a great experience with them. And enjoyed getting to know the people that I've gotten to know over at the bank as well. So, if you need help navigating the local real estate market, contact Petrocelli Homes on Niles Boulevard. With almost 2 decades of experience, this family-owned brokerage is an expert in the local real estate market. Give Jennifer Petrocelli a call. With her wide-ranging knowledge of the real estate industry and expert negotiation skills, Jennifer goes above and beyond for her clients. Jennifer helps her clients make smart real estate decisions that benefit them in the long run. So if you're looking for a realtor who knows what they're doing and who genuinely cares about your needs and wants, reach out to Jennifer today and discover why Petrocelli Homes is the right choice for all of your real estate needs.
I will give you information for Sam Choi. He is the owner of Minuteman Press.
Oh, okay.
And he, his family's been here for a long time. They've owned the business there for a long time. So he told me, he's like, I wanted to become a sponsor on the podcast. He's like, because I just think it's fun. Because I like the podcast. So.
Nice.
So I think he'd be somebody that I'd like to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been over there a few times and talked to him.
I want to tell you about Minuteman Press in Irvington. They are your quality printer to go to here in Fremont. I have personally worked with them before, and I find their services to be fantastic. Look no further than Minuteman Press in Irvington. You can find them at 44141 Fremont Boulevard in Fremont.
The Ohlone College Flea Market is happening every second Saturday of the month from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Ohlane's Fremont campus. Hey, Van, if people want to contact you, how do they get in touch?
So our phone number is 510-659-6285, and the email is fleamarket@ohlone.edu. More information can be found at ohlone.edu/flea-market.
On the off chance that you are a parent with kids not yet in school, but have time to listen to a podcast and listen through the ads, just wanted to mention that Banter Bookshop has 2 different story times. There's a story time on Thursdays and a story time on Saturdays. The Thursday and the Saturday story times start at 10:30 a.m. The Banter Bookshop Storytime welcomes kids of all ages. Banter Bookshop is in downtown Fremont on Capitol Avenue.
And now, back to our conversation. Well, you grew up here in Fremont, and then you said your dad was a pharmacist, and currently you are the owner of the pharmacies here, I guess, the businesses here. So tell me how that happened. Like, what was it like for your dad? What was he was invested in the community, rooted in the community, and then now you are in that role. So tell me about that transition, that part of your life.
It's a very deep connection because, you know, my dad graduated from pharmacy school the year I was born, 1977. He went to UOP. So he came to the country when he was still in high school and went to college here. So kind of a different experience for a lot of other Indian kids growing up here. Like their parents went to school in India or migrated here. So I have kind of odd second generation-ish parents. They're cool. I love my mom and dad. I love you. But in 1979, my dad, was looking for something of his own, and he met another very good, I called earlier the Emperor of Niles, Harry Avila, who, was kind of in and out of the pharmacy business and said, I've got this pharmacy here across the street from the hospital. It's pretty good for a young guy like you. My dad was working in Hollister at the time. We were living in Newark.
Okay.
But
wow,
we knew we wanted,
drive.
we knew we wanted to be up here. And so my dad took that opportunity. And there was a lot of independent pharmacies at the time. We weren't like the only rodeo. Okay. There was some in Glenmore, Mission. Almost every district had its own independent pharmacy. Yeah. Haller's actually was one of the bigger ones at that time. It's been there longer than we were there. It's been there since 1957. Wow. And so my dad's like, this is a great community. I want to raise my family here, and bought that store. Wow. Funnily enough, David Beretta, who owns the building, was telling me that there was no lease on the building, and so he helped my dad negotiate a pretty good deal on the pharmacy. But that actually, my dad's purchase in 1979 really helped boost our relationship with the community. Okay. Because we were right across the street from Washington Hospital. Right. That was burgeoning and coming up, and my dad was like, "Hey, whatever you need, I'm here." Wow. He even put a second line, we call it the bat line, at the house. After hours, they would call that line if they needed something from our pharmacy. Okay. We were always there. Okay. So that idea of service really was embedded. And, when my dad said, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to be here. That's great. I'm not just going to do it. Right. And then, over time, pharmacies, a lot of people don't have a transition plan. So we acquired a few different smaller pharmacies. There was Washington Medical. There was one right at 1800 at Mission. Okay. There were just smaller pharmacies. As people were retiring, my dad became a very trusted person to do business with. Yeah. That we were fair. That's great. We knew we were doing the right things with the community. And somewhere in the late 80s, we had the opportunity to buy Newark Howlers. Okay. And that was the original Howlers, started by the Howlers family. Okay. And so my dad jumped at the opportunity. They said, if you can do this, we'll sell you Fremont Howlers as well. And so Newark Howlers was on Thornton, and then Fremont Howlers was right across the street from a Holy Spirit Church at the time. Yeah. And we said, okay, why not? Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Let's do this. We're all in. Yeah. And so, it was just kind of this thing that just became our MO. We're going to be the pharmacy, this community, especially because of Washington Township. And you should have somebody from Washington in to talk about how Washington Hospital came, having those supporting services like an independent pharmacy. We used to be 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so it was always that you needed a pharmacy to support a hospital like that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so, as Washington Township grew, Howlers grew, and the name grew. And a lot of people don't know we own Mari Medical, Mari Plaza, the medical supply, and Howlers. We never changed the names just because,
Sure.
It was just the way you do business, but it was always the same level of service.
That's great. So speaking of level of service, you guys, like, how did you guys fare during COVID? Or like, how is it that how do you feel? And I know you're kind of tooting your own horn, but like, how is it that you feel that you do compared to, say, some of the chains out there and stuff? Like, what is it that makes you guys stand out as in your different pharmacies that you have around the area?
So a little bit to go backwards, I spent my career in tech, and my dad's like, I'm ready to be done with this. And my brother, who is a pharmacist, like, I don't know if I could do all of this. And so I said, I'll take a leave of absence. And I took a leave of absence in 2018 and started looking at the business.
So you weren't involved in like it was your dad's thing. Your brother was kind of involved a little bit, but you were doing something completely different.
Completely different.
Okay.
I worked 20 years in tech at IBM.
Okay.
Yeah, total corporate.
Yeah.
Wore a blue suit kind of stuff.
So in 2018, that's when you started looking at
what can we do? Yeah.
You took a leave of absence and started looking at what you could do. Okay.
Yeah. And then in 2019, we made a decision that, maybe it's time to transition the pharmacies. And, my family and I decided, because I had the business background, I'll take over the stores. And so 2019, we're going through this transition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning about pharmacy. I'm relying a lot on my staff. And we're just kind of going through, growing pains.
Yeah.
People like, Howlers, you're still around? My grandma went to Howlers. That's when I joined the chamber, it was like, Howlers? Oh, you guys are still there? I had a walker for my mom like 10 years ago from there. So I was like, yeah, we're still there. And we got these other places. And then, as I was kind of getting into my groove, like you said, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And, because I wasn't a pharmacist, I was getting more and more involved in the community, like the chamber, Niles Rotary, like just because I couldn't work the pharmacy.
That's right.
I can't dispense drugs. Yeah. Please don't ask me for drug advice. I play one on TV. Right. I'm really not a pharmacist. But people still ask me. But when the pandemic hit, I was telling you the story earlier that one of our stores actually had the first case of COVID in Monterey County.
Wow.
And we were a first known case, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I told you we hired somebody who does like blood and guts cleaning, because we were an essential business.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I couldn't close the doors.
Sure.
People's prescriptions were sitting there, medications were sitting there, vaccines were sitting there. We couldn't just close up. And that experience down in Monterey County kind of guided what I needed to do up here in Fremont. This community wasn't any different than any other community being affected right now.
Yeah.
And so we signed up for every program. At that time we applied for waivers to do testing. There were no vaccines.
Yeah.
We did drive up. We, made sure our delivery was intact. I hired extra delivery drivers. We wanted to make sure everybody got their medications. We, not only medications, we also do medical supplies like ostomy, for people who have, the bags and they need, they need their wound care. I mean, this isn't stuff you could just buy off Amazon all the time.
Yeah.
And so we needed to be open, and my staff were afraid.
Yeah.
And, the other thing was masks and gloves and, toilet
paper,
exactly. Hand sanitizer. Yeah. We actually made our own hand sanitizer in our compounding lab, because we said, we need to stay open. Who else needs hand sanitizer?
Wow.
And, some people said, you're a price gouger. I only charged whatever I was getting it for, whatever cost was.
Yeah.
My brother drove to LA one time to get these Korean masks that became really popular. He drove in the morning and drove back.
Oh my word.
Because he had a friend down there. And so we was all hands on deck.
Wow.
But what that experience taught me is, in between that, the organizations that needed masks or to stay open that weren't getting it, we donated I had a friend of my brother's whose mom started sewing masks.
Wow.
And we started selling them, and we donated everything to Life Elder Care because we said these people are sitting at home and they need their medication, they need their food because they can't leave the house. So we just said, okay, we're going to give it back.
Yeah.
Give it back.
That's great. And so things went well for you during COVID, I guess, in that way. You were able to take the initiative to do what you needed to do in order to make that happen. But did you experience any kind of flux? I mean, you were an essential business, so there's that part of it. But did you feel any strain one way or the other during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, everybody did, right? Everybody felt like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And, my focus at that time was to be proactive. This can't be the forever state.
Sure, right.
We heard that vaccines were coming out. We knew that they were going to be under sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah.
The fridge cost, freezer cost, $10,000 or something like crazy like that. I'm really grateful for the fact that I was in a city like Fremont because I knew so many resources to reach out to. It was easier to go and say, look, we're preparing for the influx of vaccines. We need access to this.
Yeah.
And the city, the county, the state, the government really came through. But, I had to put the work in.
Yeah.
But I felt so supported in this city. I don't know, like I told you, we own stores in other cities.
Sure.
Fremont just became this, wow.
That's great.
Like the best story. I love this is the story that why I love Fremont is in the early days, you guys all remember when vaccines were going to expire and you got the one that fell off the truck if you were lucky and, calling pharmacies. Well, the county said we have about 220 vaccines that are going to expire on Monday.
Wow.
And it was Wednesday night. It was 9:00. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, is the Pope Catholic? I'm taking these.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know nobody else is up.
Yeah.
I said, we'll got them. There's somebody to pick them up. We're going to drive to Alameda County Health Department. We'll pick them up.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was going to do with them. No idea. And then called the mayor because you can do that in Fremont. Not everybody, but I will say this: our city is accessible.
That's right.
And she put us in touch with the fire department, who said we need our fire department is vaccinated, but there's a few that didn't get it. And then our police department is lower down on the list. Can you do this? And in 2 days, we did a drive-through clinic on a Saturday and vaccinated almost 250 people.
Oh, my word.
And this was January of 2021.
Wow.
So it was early days.
Very early on.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. You have been in a significant role in the Chamber of Commerce for a couple years. So what was your role in the chamber?
I was the chair.
Chair, okay. And then you just mentioned also before we started recording that you were on the PTA for
Mission Center.
So what else do you do? Like what else do you
Well, I'm also on the Planning Commission.
Okay.
It's not my fault. But early on when I was younger in Fremont, and I learned how Fremont was run, and I kind of made a conscious decision that, I don't know if I have to be political, but I do want to have a voice. The Planning Commission was something that I really felt like it guides the way a city looks, feels, and acts.
Yeah.
You still have to permit things, and the state makes us do things, and it's really hard, but bringing that voice of somebody who grew up here, whose son is growing up here, who's involved in the community, I just felt like that's where I could apply my skills.
That's great. Yeah.
And so it's hard. Like I said, don't blame me, but I always tell my son there's a method to my madness. Because he's like, you're always in meetings. You're on a board meeting. He's like, what are you doing? And as he got older and there was less things to do with him, and Ricky, you've seen him everywhere with me, and he's like, can you not go anywhere and talk to people? And I said, there's a method to this, because when I came back, I always say about coming back, even though I was living here before I took over the pharmacies, but I always say I came back when I really got involved in the pharmacies, and the chamber was my first place I went. Actually, Niles Rotary. Niles Rotary family. My dad forced me. No, I love Niles Rotary. But it was this thing. My dad said, if you come, you have to take Thursdays off, come to lunch with these people, they sing.
Yeah.
You guys all have to experience Niles Rotary.
Yeah, that's right.
Please, otherwise I'm going to get fined for not saying it. But it was
I had the privilege of being a speaker one time. It was a great experience.
But it was this thing, the way my dad trained me to say, you got to do Niles Rotary. Okay. Then it was the chamber, and then it was school because of Aiden. Sorry, Aiden, I mentioned you. But the thing was, like I said, the method was, as you see the need, you have the skills, you have the drive, and like you and I were talking about before, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
I'm a homeowner, thankfully, here. I'm a business owner here. My friends are here. I'm invested here. Yeah. So it is kind of, I feel like, when you see that opportunity, like as, the PTA, the opportunity was, I actually went to mission for a year. Both my brothers went to mission. My cousins went to mission. Yeah. So mission was part of my DNA. So it's kind of like, it was a natural, I'm going to get involved because I can bridge that gap between parents who are going through it and, somebody who went through it. And so I think if you want to talk about what makes Fremont happy, I think there's that uniqueness in Fremont, that there is more of that than we see. Yeah. There are, when we go to events, whether it's Street Eats or the festival, or I even went to an engineering day thing, Fremont brings together that community. They do. Yeah. And, the more we can say that it's inviting, it's the more happier we are.
Yeah, that's right.
I think the invitingness.
That's right. Yeah,
that's even a word.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Something you just said caused me to have a little bit of an epiphany. I was just thinking about this. I think that when we think about happiness, and when we think about a good community, we think about it. I think we think about it in a limited way. I think we think about it in an immediate, somewhat, almost a temporary way. In other words, we're so used to everything being accessible so easily and so quickly these days. So the thing that made me think about it is, you said, your dad started these business, you're a business owner, you're a homeowner. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking and I'm not saying that you didn't do anything, and I'm not saying that it wasn't your work and your investment. But part of the reason why you could do that is because because you have a multi-generational legacy and foundation on which you can stand. And so there's a sense in which I think there's two ways to look at this. I as you were talking, this is what was coming to my mind, is that you're realizing that perhaps your role in our community is to be responsible for the foundation, what was built on the foundation that the previous generations left you. And the way that you're going to make Fremont continue to last is by taking the responsibility seriously to make the best use of what was created for you, created by them, that you've now taken over, and make the best of it, make it last, make a difference in the community. And I do think that that's one of the things in looking to the future for people who are here, I would say like myself, it's like, do I need to think about what I'm doing now in this community to be something that I'm only looking for temporary results or immediate results? Or am I looking to help create something for the next generation? And I think that that's something, I think having that holistic, being a caretaker of, and not even a caretaker, being an inheritor, I guess. I'm a recipient of, a beneficiary of the past generation and what they've given to us. Looking at what we have now, and then looking at how what we're doing is going to last long after we're gone. I think it's a mindset that we have to take, and I honestly think that might be part of the secret to the happiness that exists within our community.
I agree because, you talked a lot about my dad and kind of he was in the front, but my mom was this sort of undercover ninja, if you will, who, got married, came to California from Canada, moved, immigrated from India first, and, was new here. She dove head in and felt so comfortable here in Fremont, signed us up for all the classes, soccer, everything, that everybody's doing still, and, didn't feel like an outsider, made friends here. In watching my mom, completely in a new place, be this strong, and having both my dad and my mom and then my grandparents, they lived around the corner from us. You're right, the multi-generational part of it really instills that piece of it. And I think if, for those of you who don't have that here in Fremont, think about everybody else who came. Why do you think the districts and all of that history, it's really important because it's built on those families.
That's right.
And they were multi-generational. But if you're new here, you're getting to benefit from their legacies, if that makes sense. That was hard work multi-generationally. And I look at, what my grandparents did, and what my mom did, and what my dad did, and now what we're doing. It's just kind of, that's why Fremont can be the way it is, because there's legacy and there's growth. Yeah,
that's right. That's great. I think that that's something that we need to remember as a city, is that we are the beneficiary. We are all, not just you, we are all beneficiaries of the generations before us. So that's one of the reasons why we can appreciate Niles, or we can appreciate Centerville, or we can appreciate Irvington or Mission San Jose, or any of the districts, because they were all individual communities with generational establishment in those places. And so we all, as a newcomer, we're beneficiaries of what's happened generation after generation. And I think that we need to be thinking about, we need to be thinking about what's happening now, who we are now, because I do think that that's so important. I think sometimes we lose, we think about what we've been, we imagine what we can be, we don't take, I guess in some sense, pride or joy in who we are. And I think we need to do that as well. But I think we also need to not be so short-sighted that we just think about, am I happy right now? But am I in a place that I'm investing in the happiness, long term that exists here? And
is that place investing in my happiness?
That's right.
You invest, and the place is investing for you. Because I see so much of why I choose to raise my son here, and could go anywhere, didn't have to come back, I said, but being back here, my family's here, the places I grew up are here. I can share those experiences with them. My brother can share his experience with my son, and I could share it with his kids. It is very unique. And in California, of all places.
That's right.
You think of this, you think that you get this in small towns, but California, Fremont is the biggest small town.
That's right. Well, I don't know exactly what all you've been doing and how what it all looks like you've been investing, but you invested in, I guess what I could say, a campaign regarding fentanyl use or opioid use. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What is it that brought that about? And tell me a little bit about what you're doing with that.
Yeah. So, one thing, it might be unique for people to think about a pharmacy doing these campaigns, or pharmacists. And so, a couple of years ago, especially after, we started doing vaccines, we started to realize the role of pharmacy and pharmacists in the community and about getting messages out. And we were trying to hone those messages in. Well, unfortunately, my brother passed away last year from mental illness, but he did it through a purposeful fentanyl overdose. He went to San Francisco, knew exactly what he was doing, knew exactly what was going to happen. As much as he was aware, he was, I don't know, hoping or wasn't quite sure what it could do to him, but knew completely about something called Narcan. And for those of you who don't know, Narcan is the nasal spray that has become widely available over the counter anywhere to help with opioid overdoses. And, my recommendations, everybody should have one in their car, their house, everywhere. Because opioid abuse isn't just fentanyl. It could be, prescription drugs that are taken accidentally. A senior says, oh, I took my pain meds, and then takes 2 more because they forgot.
Wow.
And so, one of the things is, like I said, I like to do things. I can't just sit there. And while, mental health was ultimately what took my brother, this was a low-hanging fruit, I would say. So we partnered with a nonprofit, and you can go to the Howler's website. I'll plug the Howler's website a little bit.
And we'll put it in the show notes for sure,
that you can get your free kits at the pharmacy. We've handed out over 1,000 kits in Fremont. You can find us at Street Eats. You'll find us at the Pride events. You'll pretty much find us everywhere, because my personal belief is nobody should have to, even accidentally or purposely, have to go through that. And it is an epidemic. We've been through a pandemic, and anything that us as a community can do, you can't ignore it.
Right.
You can't say that my kids don't do drugs, I don't do drugs, but you never know. You never know. And this is so simple, so free. I was talking to somebody, with pain medication abuse and everything that's happened, the why this is free is, if you guys understand, is there was all those settlements, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
The people who created this problem are now helping to fix this problem, and we are the vessel to help fix this problem.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, so if anybody is interested in this, you said that people can pick up kits and stuff like that, but what are some other ways that people can become more informed about this? What are some things that they can do to become more aware and maybe be involved in helping with this problem in the community?
So, there's a couple of ways. One is inside the kits, or in addition to the kits, you can get fentanyl test strips. There's a lot of fake drugs out there. I am so worried about, and mom, dad, don't listen, we experimentation and things that, it's not safe out there.
Yeah, right.
And so we offer fentanyl test strips to make sure whatever you're getting isn't fake or laced with fentanyl. And that, I think, is really, really important, especially if you're going off the grid.
Yeah.
Second of all, get rid of the drugs in your medicine cabinet. You are not a pharmacist. You are not a doctor. If you are prescribed something for that particular issue and that issue is gone,
get rid of it.
Get rid of it. Yeah. We have drug take back programs in the pharmacy. There's a bin. You might say, oh, well, maybe I need that pill one day. You don't know who's going to be in your house and take those pills.
That's right.
So that's another one. And just train yourself on Narcan. Any human can do it. It doesn't take a lot. There's a Good Samaritan law in California. You're not going to get in trouble. You can't hurt anybody. And the Good Samaritan law protects you. That if you're trying to help somebody who's in need, you're protected. So don't worry, I'm going to stand back and watch this person overdose if you have the capability to help them. And that's why we want to get the information out there, because I think so many people are scared or taboo about any of these topics. And, I'll put a plug in for my pharmacist. I've been trying to bring this kind of awareness to all of my pharmacies and my staff to say, look, somebody comes in, they're coming in, they need help. Don't judge them. We did even a needle exchange program about 1.5 years ago. And at first my pharmacist was like, I don't want these drug addicts in my pharmacy. And I said, don't judge. You don't know what somebody's going through. Yeah. And it was very successful because they were opening a conversation. So keep that conversation with your healthcare professional.
That's great. Well, thank you for doing that. And thank you for raising the awareness for me and for the community. That's great. Jasmine, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for your support, your encouragement. I do think of, I think oftentimes when I'm feeling weary and exhausted and I'm kind of overreacting, I guess, a little bit, but in the moments where I'm getting frustrated about like, what is it that I need to cut and what is it worth it? And there are things that you've said over the last couple of years that have just encouraged me and kind of kept me going. So I appreciate your support and your encouragement regarding the podcast. And now it's been a great joy to have you as a guest on the podcast. So thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
This episode was hosted and produced by Ricky B. I'm Gary Williams. Andrew Cavett is the editor. Scheduling and pre-interviews by Sarah S. Be sure to subscribe wherever it is that you listen so you don't miss an episode. You can find everything we make, the podcast, and all of our social media links at thefremontpodcast.com. Join us next week on The Fremont Podcast.
This is a Muggins Media podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fremont Podcast. If you are an individual or a business that would like to be a sponsor partner on the podcast, please reach out at thefremontpodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, thefremontpodcast.com, and you can reach out to us through our contact form. Thank you for listening, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your support.